So, there's a new League of Legends champion, or there's about to be. Anyway, Yunara here has been recently revealed, along with her lore and her splash art, and an ability reveal from Skin Spotlights that we'll take a look at a little bit later. And a couple of interesting things about her is that she's connected to the Kinku, which it's been a hot minute since we had anyone connected to the Kinku release into the game. That's Shen and Kennen and Kali, as well as, to a certain extent, Zed, and by extension Kayn are also... It's the League of Legends Ninja Clan nonsense that they've got going on over there. That's what that's connected to. But she's also connected to the Darkin, which means that not only is Yunara here a champion in and of herself, she's also clearly teasing a future champion who is yet to come to the game, a Darkin Glaive. And the lore, according to Spideraxe here, is during the Darkin War, Yunara, the Kinku Order's Fist of Shadow, sacrificed herself to contain the Darkin Glaive within the Spirit Realm. There she remained until the Wild Bloom returned, both her and the shrine she was sealed within to the mortal realm. Now that's, there she remained until the Wild Bloom. That's a little bit of a Garden Path sentence. But sure. Now, centuries in the future, Yunara finds herself in an Ionia she barely recognizes, armed with knowledge and techniques long forgotten until now. When the eye is blinded and the heart falters, the fist must strike all the harder. So, let's have a look at her character design then, as best as I can, and ask one of the questions that I'm classically known for asking, which is, why is she hot? Like, why is that a thing which she is? Now, in character design, there's no such thing as a neutral choice, right? Like, there's no such thing as not making a decision. Everything that a fictional character looks like is because someone made the decision to make them look that way. This is one of the ways in which, like, character design is distinct from reality. In reality, there's a lot of things where people don't make decisions about how they look. Like, I'm bald, didn't make that decision, that's just a thing that happened to me. Right, like, if I don't shave, my beard grows up. Like, there are many things that affect the way that I look in reality, that real people look, that are just sort of like, that's just how people look sometimes, right? Not so much in character design. Everything about a character, all of it, every single pixel, every line, every aspect, every color, every proportion, all of it is a decision that someone made. Which means that every aspect of a character is open to the question, why that? Why the purple color, for example? Why the orbs as weapons? Why these sort of heavy, interestingly shaped, sort of overlaying plates around her hip there, like sort of holding the pleats of her skirt up? Why the sort of liquid-inspired shape language on the skirt around her leg? It almost looks like, you know, like water curving around her. Why the sort of demonic dragon face on the orb that she's throwing forward? Why these, like, rope things that she's got in her hair ornament thing? That's something like, why any of it? Like, the question is available for everything. Why this as opposed to any given alternative, right? And the reason why I tend to focus on why are the characters hot all the time is because, first of all, the answer is obvious. Like, it's not a question from which I'm like, I can't figure out why this happened. It's not a question, but it's a question which is interesting because it reveals something about the way that character design works especially in corporate product, but also just character design in general. The simple short answer is she's hot because it sells, right? Like, that's sort of the very shallow answer to the question. She's hot because, well, this beautiful character, hot lady, sells, right? It's that it moves skins, it's popular with people, and Riot Games are very proud of saying that they are a data-driven company, which is to say they perform so much data investigation of their player base. They send out surveys, that's the most obvious thing that they do, but also they gather all of the data that they can, all of the data on what players click on, what players engage with, what sells, what doesn't sell. They have all of that, and they are driven by that data, at least according to themselves. Now, Riot makes some very specific decisions about which data they decide to be driven by, and that's a rant for another time, but when the character looks the way that she does, on the corporate level, it's at least partly because they have a whole bunch of data that says this is what League of Legends players, broadly speaking, as like a sort of broad group, this is what they want, right? Like, when we're talking about a character like Yunara, this is what League of Legends players want. So there's the commercial aspect to it, right? Like, that's a big part of it. That's also sort of the shallow answer because it's an easy answer, right? Like, it's like, oh, well, it's because of sex sells and therefore, like, we don't have to think about it any further. Now, sex sells is not strictly true. It's true in many cases, but it's not true just ontologically under all circumstances. Sex sells certain things, doesn't sell everything. For example, if you are like a parent of 4 children and you need a car to take them to school with, and you would like that car to be very safe, please. And you go to the car dealership and you're just like, okay, can I get the safety stats on this car? And they're like, absolutely, no, actually, but here's a beautiful woman standing next to the car, and she's very sexy. Do you want to buy it now? You'd go, no, actually, I want to see the safety stats because my children are going to be in that car and they're going to die if this car crashes. I want to know about it before I put down a down payment for it. Same thing with like a washing machine, a power drill. Sex can, in certain circumstances, be used as part of the marketing to sell these things, but simply making a sexy ad for a power drill is not going to sell the power drill, because the people who need power drills, who need power tools to do certain jobs are going to be like, yeah, okay, but what's the RPM? Like, how much can this thing actually handle for torque? Like, that's the information I need. That's the information that's going to sell it to me. So, like, yeah, sex sells is a truism. It is often true in part or under some circumstances, but it is not just true because, right? Sex sells is not universally true. This is also true of character design. Urgot is not sold on his sex appeal, but he's still a great fucking character design, right? Like, a lot of people want to fuck Urgot, absolutely, but that's not the thing that's selling him, not the way that Evelyn is sold on her sex appeal, right? In character design, yes, sex can sell, but it's not the only thing that sells. It's not the only thing that always sells, and it's not always the best product to sell under all circumstances, which means, again, if we want a slightly more interesting answer to the question, why is this character hot? It's not enough just to say, oh, sex sells, blah, blah, blah. Like, just kind of dribble that out the side of your mouth and go, okay, that's fine. I have engaged in a thought-terminating cliche. I don't need to think about the question any deeper. So where are the deeper answers here? Well, there's probably a scientific dissertation in that somewhere that I could have written back when I was at university, if I'd actually taken those goddamn art courses I wanted. But oh well, regrets of the past. Why is she hot? Well, it's at least in part the commercial, right? Like, that's a big part of it. It's a lot of data-driven nonsense, but it's also a lot of the time because when you have a corporate design process, right? Like, when we go from the artists getting the sort of design brief of like, oh, this is a marksman champion and she's in the bottom lane and she's this ranged attacks and we want to tie her into these themes and this region and stuff, they'll start coming up with iterations, and they'll come up with so many iterations. They'll do so many explorations. They'll do different concepts. They'll do different versions of the character, different genders, different like identities, different like, oh, here's one that like uses these orbs to sort of throw ranged attack things, and here's one that uses bow, here's one that uses a gun, here's one that throws spears, like whatever. They'll do a million iterations, and then there's a collaborative process where artists and other artists will get together. Okay, this one works, that one doesn't work. Like, I have a process of mutual critique, and then the outcome of that process will be taken to a different group of people who like do feedback in over it, crosses over, like, and dozens and dozens and dozens of people, sometimes hundreds of people, will be part of that review process, right? Like, dozens and hundreds of what are called often stakeholders will review the process of the product that's being created so far, and they'll all go, oh, okay, like, my criticism is this, my critique is that, my concern is this, I have a mandate that means I need to push you to prioritize this thing or that thing. And, like, there's a million people who sort of get a say in saying, oh, that thing doesn't work, that thing doesn't work. Like, and there's things like cultural sensitivity consultants, right? Which is to say, hey, that particular piece of costume is, like, sacred to a religious tradition in X country. You can't use that costume on a character like this because that would be mortally disrespectful to people who live in that, like, particular culture. Or this is a color combination that's the same as the colors of a flag that means something specific. Like, there's all kinds of concerns, right? And that's a process of iterative sanding of the character design, essentially, which is to say, every single time the character goes out for feedback and reviews, everyone raises every concern that they could possibly have, right? Like, everyone goes, oh, my concern is this, my concern is this, my concern is this, change this, change that, we want this change, we want that change, we want this thing change. And it's many, many groups of people with many different agendas, many different concerns, many different areas of responsibility that they need to deal with, all of them over and over again sanding the character design down until the character design is of the lowest number of concern to the smallest amount of people, right? Like, it's not necessarily about creating the perfect character design, but it's about getting the character design to a point where the stakeholders who have a say in what needs to be present in this commercial product are, as a group, collectively satisfied that, okay, we don't have any major concerns with this anymore. The result of that is a default to the lowest common denominator, right? Like, if you go through that process enough times, it doesn't matter how creative, how interesting, how vibrant, how wild, how out there, how avant-garde the thing that you started with is, by the end of that process, no matter what you started with, the end result of it will be something that's much more lowest common denominator, much more broadly appealing, much more broadly inoffensive to the largest number of people possible, so that the fewest number of people possible could possibly have any critique of it, right? That's the process of this stuff, and that happens at every corporation. Like, it happens to small indie game studios as well. Like, this happens on every level to varying degrees of severity, and generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, the bigger a company is, the more corporate it is, the more levels of layers of management that there are between the artist and the final product, the more you'll go through that process of iterative sanding down until every interesting or radical or pushing the envelope or like wild design concept involved in a character design process is just kind of sanded off at the edges. And the artists who go through this process aren't stupid, right? Like, they know what the hell they're doing. This is their job. They do it for a living. So they know that that's going to happen, right? And so over time, artists who work in these environments have a tendency to start shaping their design process to fit the environment that they're in. They know that if they swing for the fences with this wild, cool thing that's like this really cool idea that they have in their head, they know that some stakeholder somewhere is going to go, ooh, that's a little bit wild, that's a little bit too much, isn't it? Could we maybe tone that down a little bit? Like, someone somewhere is going to have a problem with it, and then someone else is going to have a problem with the revision to the thing, and then someone's going to have a problem with that. And they know that this shit is just going to get sanded down. They know that that idea is not going to make it through the design process because they're experienced with this. They've been through it before. And so they start to design for... Like, they start designing character designs that they know will succeed at the company they are working for, right? Like, they start going, okay, if I want my ideas to get through, right? If I want my influence to be felt in this creative project, if I want to get any of my ideas going, I have to go for the ideas that are going to be acceptable to the corporate environment that I'm in, right? And so they start pitching less interesting ideas. So they start iterating in less interesting ways, or they start just acquiescing more easily. When they get the feedback, they kind of go, yeah, I kind of knew I was going to get that feedback. Fuck, let's just... And then they move on because, like, they've been through the process before. And much like the character design gets grinded down by this process of iterative sanding to a less and less radical, less and less interesting form, so too do the artist's creativity kind of suffer under these circumstances. So too do the artists kind of go, okay, I don't necessarily want to put my career on the line fighting for this, because if I fight really, really hard for this really cool idea that I have, and then it goes out, and because it's a risky idea, because it's something new, unexpected, something that like people aren't used to, if it fucking falls on its face and fails, that goes on me, right? Like, that I'm going to be held partly responsible for that shit, which means I'm not going to get the next big project, right? Like, or that I'm going to get negative on my performance, like, whatever it is, like, the fear of, like, the failure of the thing having negative consequences. All of these things, like the sex sells truism, right? The market consideration, the commercial consideration, the layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of corporate feedback process, where the feedback process has a feedback process that has a feedback process, and the fact that the artists working in these environments just learn to design to the environments that they are in, all of that together forms the answer for why are not just League of Legends champions, certainly not just Yunara, but when you look at character design in corporate video game art, like in AAA gaming, why does it so often default to beauty? And I don't just mean sexiness, I don't just mean sex appeal, I mean beauty, right? Beauty, things that are just like, look good, look nice, right? Like, ugliness is not a feature that anyone usually takes a swing on, because ugliness is unappealing. Beauty and appeal are so often these default modes of operation. These things that the companies just repeat over and over and over and over and over again. Beautiful, 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 appealing, appealing, appealing. They look cool, they look hot, they look badass, they look appealing, they look beautiful, they are unchallenging, and often quite uninteresting and bland, but they are unchallenging and broadly appealing. Why is this? Well, it's because, not just because an artist is uncreative, not just because one company's executives are like killjoy bastards who hate creativity and fun, not just because one thing, but because there is a systemic pressure that's present in the entire corporate structure, in the entire business structure of AAA video games that is putting this downwards pressure on everything that comes out to conform to lowest common denominators. And beauty, perhaps more than any other feature, any other trait that exists in art, beauty is the lowest common denominator. It is the thing that the vast majority of people have the least amount of problem with. Almost everyone on Earth can get together around and say, hey, this thing that's beautiful, this thing that's appealing, this thing that looks nice, do we have a problem with that? Well, no. No one has a problem with the thing that looks nice, because the thing looks nice, right? The fewest number of people in the world are going to have a problem with the thing that just looks nice, the thing that has no friction, the thing that is like broadly kind of the same as all of the other things that exist because we're used to them. They don't cause us friction, they don't cause us concern, they don't upset us, they don't challenge us in any way. They just kind of affirm, oh yeah, I like things that look like this already, and here's another thing that looks broadly like that. I like that thing, I don't have a problem with it. And so things like this get to have a greater chance of surviving those processes of design iteration and sanding, right? Because these traits of being beautiful, these traits of being gorgeous, appealing, of being inoffensive, right? They have a greater chance of surviving that process via, like, essentially a sort of element of creative natural selection. That is why Yunara is hot. On a structural level, that is why Yunara is hot, right? The reason I bring that up is because, well, we read that story, right? What are the fundamental features of who this character is? Number one, she's the Fist of Shadow, which is to say, she is the assassin of the Kinku Order. She is the one when the Eye of Twilight and when the Heart of the Tempest, which is Shen and Kennen, currently have been other people in the past, when these people cannot find a way to restore the balance within their remits, she's the one who goes in, the Fist of Shadow is the one who goes in and says, okay, some motherfucker is gonna have to die in order to restore balance to the Force or the whatever, right? In order to restore balance to the Spirit Realm, some motherfucker is gonna have to die. It's dark, it's violent, it is not necessarily evil, but it's certainly not nice, right? Like, it's a character whose function is like cruel to be kind, right? Like, thematically, that's where it is. And we see this represented quite nicely in many ways in Akali herself, especially her character design after the reboot, where they brought in, like, in order to contrast her, to make her something that stands out and is like, seems very much apart from the rest of the Kinku, she gets that more urban-inspired street fashion thing that she's got going on. She gets to have, like, the tattoos. A lot of her shape language is quite sharp and aggressive. She's also still hot. Very hot. Good lord. That character was designed very much to appeal to me. And it does, let me tell you. But, like, there was this active effort made to distinguish who Akali is, what role she plays thematically relative to her colleagues in the Kinku Order, by distinguishing her character design visually very strongly from the two of them, right? To sort of mark her out as different, to create a little bit of friction, a little bit of tension with what Shen and Kennen have got going on. Again, not saying that they did a great job with it necessarily, but just demonstrating that that's like a design consideration that exists within the character of the Fist of Shadow, right? Like, that's something that the Fist of Shadow already sort of, that's part of the remit there. That the Fist of Shadow is supposed to be the slightly grittier, the slightly darker, the slightly edgier, the slightly scarier, the slightly more dangerous, right? The slightly more lethal, the slightly more brutal, the slightly more merciless. That's all of the things that she's, like, the Fist of Shadow, which is not always a woman. The Fist of Shadow is supposed to represent all of these things thematically within the Kinku Order, in the same way that Shen, being the Eye of Twilight, is supposed to represent balance, serenity, like seeing both sides of every issue, and like taking the smallest amount of action to restore like a very timid balance between two things that can collapse very easily, right? Like, Shen is sort of supposed to represent those things, which he sort of tried to do with, like, the armor and the very sort of rigid character design that he has. Again, Shen, I don't know that he's necessarily a great execution of the concept behind his lore either, but that's the idea. So now I ask the question, relative to that particular part of her theme, what what does the sexiness bring to that equation? This is a question that could also be asked of Akali, by the way. A character design I like a lot because it's designed specifically to appeal to me. It's very appealing. But what does that, the beauty, the sexiness, do relative to the idea that she's more dangerous, she's more lethal, she's more merciless, she's the one who's supposed to make the hard decisions, act in violence on elements that are threatening to destabilize the order? What does the sexiness, beauty, the hotness do for that? Well, the answer is not much. There are things you can do there, like the femme fatale trope is a visual classic there. It's like, okay, we have a feminine character, we want to imply that they have the capacity for like lethal violence, for like the capacity for cruelty, for evil. There's the femme fatale archetype that's often used, right? Like where we connect beauty and sexuality to a sense of danger and lethality, right? Like, and there's, you know, you can have a long feminist critique of that whole archetype and the way that it's put together and all the rest of it, but that exists, right? Like, that's available as a thing to draw upon if you wanted to connect feminine beauty to murderous lethality, to mercilessness, to, like, danger. Those tropes are available. And I guess we're kind of doing that a little bit, sort of like, at least in the sense that anytime there's a beautiful woman who's also lethal, you can't help but wander into the territory of the femme fatale, but that's not really what her character design is doing. She's not really that, like, sensual seductress, like, dangerous, like, beautiful woman hiding a knife behind her back. That's not really the vibe that Yunara is doing here, right? Like, much more than that, we've got a sort of, like, with the tightly wrapped upper bodysuit here, right, as well as, like, the long flowing garments down low, we have more of a sort of monkish vibe, right? More like a sort of fantasy monk kind of archetype, right? Very much like martial arts up close. So, like, the thing they're reaching for in terms of trying to go for lethality, danger, power, like the ability to cause harm, they seem to be reaching for those archetypes, right? Like the martial arts archetype of, like, the monk who is capable of doing lethal violence, like just using the power of their fists and their chi and, like, their inner harmony. That's also, it looks, at least going by the splash art, I haven't looked at the model and how she's animated yet, that also kind of seems to be what they're doing with her affect, with the way that the character is presented, right? Like that she's, like, steady, she's calm, she's kind of emotionless, and that's like she's merciless, she's kind of cold because she doesn't let emotion cloud her judgment. She does the thing which is necessary even when that thing is, like, lethal violence towards other people. Okay, again, if we're doing emotionless monk who's, like, not allowing the outside world to affect their decisions, again, what does beauty do for that? What does beauty, appeal, gorgeousness, hotness, what does that add to that archetype? And the answer is not much. Like, it really doesn't, those two things don't interact in any meaningful way. They don't really contrast with each other. They don't really even clash with each other in a way that would be sort of meaningful or interesting, in the way of, like, oh, these two things are kind of incongruous with one another. Maybe that suggests something about, like, the tension inherent to her position in the Kinku Order as both a deliverer of violence and an upholder of peace and order. Like, no, that's not really there. It's just, she just kind of happens to be hot. So relative to her role as the Fist of Shadow, the beauty, the hotness, it doesn't really do anything. Like, it's not a detraction, right? Like, it's not like, oh, she's hot, therefore the character design is ruined. No, it's fine. It's not detracting anything. It's not ruining anything. It's not taking anything away, but it's not adding anything. It's a lot of design space, right? Because beauty is like, it's the shape of the character's face. It's the way that she's presented. It's like the fashion choices that are being made. It's the way that her body is presented. Like, all of that is like what goes into beauty. All of those are areas of design, sites of character design, where you could make a different decision that does add something. And it doesn't have to be any one decision. It could be a number of decisions, right? Like, there's a million things you could do. For example, if she is the Fist of Shadow, if she is the person who has been dealing death for her entire career, who went to the spirit realm for 100 years to seal, like, a lethal darken in a weapon kind of thing, like, if she's someone who's always lived side by side with death and with lethality, who has always been doing lethal violence in the name of the Kinku Order to preserve balance, she's always been, like, lived her life adjacent to violence, why is that not in evidence on her body, right? Like, why aren't there, for example, battle scars? Like, why doesn't she have scarring, damage from all of the things that she has been through in her life, all of the violence that she has done, all of the lethal situations she has walked into. Again, the Fist of Shadow is only deployed in pretty dire circumstances, right? Like, it's the character who comes in as a last resort, which means, presumably, the kinds of situations she confronts, like sealing a darkened weapon, one of the most dangerous objects in the entire League of Legends world, she walks into dangerous situations all the fucking time. Why doesn't that show on her body? Why doesn't she have, like, a nose that has been visibly broken? Why isn't she missing a part of her lip? Why isn't there a scar on her, like a cool badass scar down over one eye because she was fighting like an evil demon spirit or fucking whatever? Like, why doesn't she have one arm replaced with a prosthesis? Why aren't there things in her character design that tell the visual story this character has lived a life of danger, peril, and death and violence? Why isn't that there? Well, because all of that design space is being taken up by the things that are necessary to make her beautiful, the things that are necessary to make her hot. They are taking up all of that space, and so those choices that might have been able to add a little bit more to the characterization of the character aren't being made because that space is taken up, right? Moving on to the other part, right? She is a woman out of time, right? Like a classic kind of character we're familiar with, like someone who was sealed away centuries ago and has now been unsealed into the present day, a future which is alien to her. She's alienated from the things that are happening. She doesn't understand this new world. She has these old-fashioned ideals that are clashing with, like, the values of this modern world that she's entered into. So there's supposed to be tension, right? That whole character conceit is one of tension, that she exists in tension with the world that she lives in. The world is different from her. She's someone who's supposed to look like she's from out of time, from some past, some forgotten era that doesn't exist in Ionia anymore. Once again, the question, what does the beauty and the hotness add to that? But that's not really the thing I want to bring up here. Is the thing of, like, does she look like that to you, especially? Like, if you were to look at her and you went, oh shit, she's like a prehistoric, she's a Ionian from centuries ago. She definitely looks like she's from a different time period than all of the other Ionians. Wow, if you put her next to Aurelia, I'd be like, whoa, those are clearly from completely different time period. Not really, right? Like, you look at her and it's like, oh, that's just another Ionian. Ionians, and that's the thing about, like, League of Legends character design also, because every single character has to look so unique, so distinct from one another. Every champion has to be, like, perfectly, like, distinct from every other character, like, on the roster. That means that when it comes to what do Ionians look like, well, they all kind of look like this. They all have these ridiculous costumes. They all have, like, this out there fashion. They all have this. All of them do. So Yunara comes along and it's like, yeah, no, that just looks like any other Ionian. That just looks like what the Ionians look like for the most part. There's nothing in her character design really tells that story, right? Like that thing of, like, this is a person from the deep past. This is an unfrozen caveman. This is like the equivalent of, like, if a medieval knight all of a sudden showed up in modern day, right? And they're walking around in their big knight armor going, what ho, thou over there? Why, like, escortest thou this fair lady across yon street? Good gods, a monster is charging us. And they're, like, sword fighting a car. We understand that archetype, right? None of that is present in Yunara. This sense of being out of time, of being from a completely different version of Ionia that doesn't exist anymore, some state of the culture that is long past, which is no longer present. I'm not seeing it. Like, there's a little bit of it in the bracelet here, with, like, this jade that is sort of burnishing, and what's it called? When, in Danish it's like bronze, when it tarnishes, like, it turns green and things like, it has a specific name. Is it a burnish? Is it a tarnish? One of those. Like, that is kind of there a little bit, right? Like, we kind of get, okay, this kind of looks old and ancient-ish, a little bit. And it kind of looks like, oh, this was something like almost like decayed from existing for so many centuries. That's a little bit there on the bracelets, but it's not anywhere else on her. Anywhere. Like, it's a little bit present on the orbs that look ancient and old, kind of. But nowhere else in her character design is doing that. Like, nowhere else in her character design is operating with this thing of, like, oh, she's been wearing these clothes. I guess she's been in the spirit realm where time doesn't pass, so it makes sense that her clothes haven't taken damage from that, I guess. But also, you could also just decide, no, actually, in the spirit realm, her clothes were constantly, like, taking damage or being affected by the spirit realm in some way that would affect them and be visible when she came back out. And it's like, there's nothing there. There's no tarnishing. There's no sense of, like age. There's no sense of like, decay. There's no sense of being from an ancient past in that sense. And also, aesthetically, because Ionia is so fucking weird already and it doesn't have a contemporary aesthetic that we're familiar with as League of Legends players very much, there's no way for an audience to identify that these are supposed to be ancient, old-timey clothes from long ago. There just isn't. Like, there are design tropes you can use to indicate those things. Like, a very common thing is, oh, clothes from the very long ago times, they were simpler, right? Like, because they, and that's like, if you think of, again, the example of the medieval knight, right? A medieval peasant who comes to the present day, like, we're all wearing t-shirts with, like, color prints, and we've got hats and things, like, we've got accessories and all that shit, and the peasant is like, well, I have a tunic and some pants, because I'm a peasant, and it's all gray because I can't afford the dyes that are necessary to color my clothes. And so the peasant has this much simpler aesthetic because industrial techniques for the production of fabric hadn't advanced as much. And then with the modern characters, they're much more complex and much more vivid and wild and varied, whereas the old-timey characters are more sort of identical to one another. There's less variation, and they have, like, less vibrant colors and certain colors that they just don't have access to. That's a way to do it. Like, you could have Yunara specifically have a much more distinctly simple fashion than the modern Kinku order, like the modern Ionians have. Like, maybe she has much more simple fashion that's, like, conspicuously this was made at a time when they were less able to manufacture, like, elaborate clothes like this, or skin-tight bodysuits like that. And I guess maybe now that she's come back from the past or whatever into the future, maybe they just gave her some new clothes. I mean, fine. But again, there's a decision here you could make that would do something to tell that part of her story, and it's not being made. And again, it kind of seems like part of the reason why that decision to tell the story of someone who's out of time, who's, like, out of step with the world that they are in now, is not being taken because we want her to look beautiful. We want her fashion to be cool and appealing. And, like, we don't want to do this trope of, like, oh, she comes from the olden times, therefore her fashion is less cool. No, she comes from the olden times, and therefore her fashion is exactly as cool as all the other fashion that's already there. Like, the opportunity to create distinction is not there. The other thing is, why isn't she just older? Like, again, this is a very surface level thing, but if you want to show that a character is from an ancient, older time, from the way back long ago times, a very simple way to do it is just to make them old, right? Like, and that's not necessarily always elegant, it's not necessarily the smartest solution to that problem, but it is a way to indicate that this character comes from a deep past and has, like, a deep well of experience that other people have forgotten. Well, make them old? That kind of does that, because old people have all of this old traditional knowledge from long ago that the young people have forgotten. You could just make her old in order to kind of achieve that a little bit, but again, she needs to be beautiful, which means she needs to be about 23 years old. And so that's there. Why is she as skinny as she is? There are many, many ways for a human body to be strong, right? Like, I've brought up the example. Actually, let me fucking find it, because it's really useful. I should be able to find it with this particular search query. Yeah, this one will do. I've shown this image before, right? When it comes to presentations of strength in a human body, not just a female body, but a human body, it can take many different forms. It depends on the kinds of activities that a person is engaged with. So Cheryl Hayworth over here, obviously she's fat. She also does weightlifting. She could bench press you over her head, probably with one arm, because the lady is strong. She's not skinny, though. And when you look at other people who are powerlifters, other people who do that kind of like physical strength activity, they often have very thick bodies. Like, some of them are fat, some of them are just thick and stocky, because in order to do that kind of feat of strength, you need so much core strength. You need those fucking... You can't have a snatched hip. You need your core to be muscled as fuck in order to do this. And you can sort of see these things bearing out. We have here, like, Svetlana Korkina, who does gymnastics, and she has more of that snatched waist, right? Like, but she also, you can see, she's very wiry. in the way that her arms are put together, the way that her legs are put together, relative to, for example, someone who does trampoline. Like, clearly, this lady needs her fucking thighs to do some of the things that she does in a way that, like, the gymnastics person maybe doesn't in quite the same way. And if you look at many, many pictures of many, many high-level athletes doing many different kinds of activities, what you find is like, okay, you can do things to the way that the body is constructed that changes the way. Like, long distance running is not the same kind of body as, like, high jump, right? It's not quite the same kind of body as volleyball. There was a boxer, I think, was photographed by the same photographer. Let me see if I can find that image, because that's actually also really good. Let's see. Where's the boxer? I don't think I can find her, but I can find this one, which is a useful example in the male category, right? Wrestling does not have the same body type as soccer, does not have the same body type as basketball, does not have, like, even within the wrestlers, right, you can see there's a distinction in the way that the body types are put together. Point being, the kind of strength that a character has, the kind of fit that they are, right? There are things you can do even if the goal is we want this character to be physically fit, we want them to be athletic, we want them to look powerful, we want them to be skinny, we want them to be thin. Even within that limitation, there are things you can do that specifically tell the story of what kind of violence does this person do. Because she has some muscle to her, right? Like, she has, you can see there's like some coiled muscle, some tension in it there, but this is also kind of a fitness influencer waist. Right, like, this is also this is a body type that is chosen not so much because it aligns with, oh, this is the kind of physical activity that she does. This is a body type that's chosen because, well, people who try to look beautiful on Instagram do the kind of exercise it takes to get a body that looks like this. Not so much people who do exercise in order to achieve a functional result, which is more like the women athletes I just showed you. These were people, like, they don't give a shit about like exercise. Well, they probably do, I don't know them, but like, they're not exercising for the purpose of looking good for the Insta. They're exercising for the purpose of beating the world record by like 2.5% someday. Right, like, that's why they're doing it. It's purely function over form. Which, again, if we return to the question of the Kinku, right? Like, she's the fist of shadow for the Kinku. She's perhaps this emotionless monk who has no feelings, who's like cold and dispassionate, and who does the thing that's necessary and like achieves the violence. If that is the personality of the character, and again, I don't know her voiceover or whatever is going on, like, whatever her personality is, there's a way to shape her body to align with that personality. So if Yunara turns out to have a very playful personality, like a very fun personality, if she turns out, like, that would actually be interesting. That would actually be kind of cool. The splash art is not telling me this. Like, the way she's being presented here, I'm getting that vibe of, like, cool, cold, unfeeling, like, dispassionate assassin monk who does whatever it takes to get the job done. But it would be very fun if Yunara, like, despite being the Fist of Shadow, despite being this very serious person who, like, deals in death and lives with death every day, if in spite of that, she was kind of a chill, fun party girl. Like, if she was maybe a little bit like, I like my appearance, I exercise specifically to get the Instagram body because I want to be hot. That would be an interesting point of personality for her character, right? If that is who the character is, then this body is doing the storytelling for that kind of person. Right? That body type that tells us, oh, okay, this is someone who exercises. Yeah, sure, she wants to be a good assassin, but she also wants to look good because she likes having a snatched waist. She likes looking beautiful for the, whatever the, like, Ionian equivalent of the Instagram is. That would be good storytelling. That would do something. Again, I don't think that's who the character is. I'm not getting any indications that that's who the character is, but that's a way in which this beauty, this gorgeousness that she has, would serve the character, would tell us something about who they are, and, like, support the story that's being told, rather than being this thing that's sort of sitting in the way of more interesting choices. Because I think the more interesting choice is, okay, Yunara is this marksman, again, I want to look at her abilities and exactly how she does it, who, like, uses these orbs and this martial arts thing in order to, like, do violence and kill people. What's the style of that? Is it like rhythmic gymnastics where she's like flipping around and doing flips and like spinning her legs and shit? Like, is very sort of dance-like, athletic? Okay, cool. Then I would reference the bodies of Olympic-level rhythmic gymnasts, right, in order to create the body type for the character that tells you this is how that character works. If it's much more like she's doing, like, there's a style of Chinese martial art, I cannot remember its name. Is it Qigong or something like that? There's a style of Chinese martial art which is very much about hardening the body, right? Which is about like these very strong, like this very physical strength focused thing with like these very direct movements that are present. I think it was used as the basis for the Earthbenders in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Don't quote me on that, but I think so. And like, what do the bodies of the high-level practitioners of that kind of martial art look like? Like, that would be the kind of reference pictures I would go looking for. What does that do to your body to practice that style of martial arts, right? Again, I don't know if maybe, like, and again, I have not seen how she animates. Maybe the way that she animates comports perfectly with the exact body type she has, in which case, it's good. That's good. That is good visual storytelling. I'm just saying, the way that this body is presented, in conjunction with the fact that beauty is clearly being prioritized in the character design, I don't get the sense that this character was designed for Spartan, direct utilitarian practicality. I'm also kind of looking at her outfit and going like, yeah, no, that doesn't look like the outfit of someone who's like, I only care about the mission. I only care about fulfilling my purpose. I have no aesthetic aspirations. I am ascetic. I am like emotionless. I don't care about how I'm being perceived. I will wear whatever clothes are necessary in order to do the job because I am the Fist of Shadow and I uphold the balance of the whatever in the spirit realm and so on. That's not really the sense I get from her fashion. Her fashion is quite elaborate and very fancy. And like, okay, it's a ceremonial costume, I guess, but why does the ceremonial costume for the Fist of Shadow look that way, then? Like, what is this costume design supposed to tell us? Either about her as a person, or about the group that she belongs to. This is where we again get back to that problem of her not looking like she's from the ancient past. It's like, and again, it's a problem League of Legends tends to have generally because it's so focused on making every character as individually unique as humanly possible, is that thing of like you lose the capability of storytelling that can come from having a uniform and divergences from that uniform, right? What does this costume tell us about the way that the Fist of Shadow operates as a part of the Kinku? What does it tell us about their cultural role within the Kinku? Well, it's hard to tell, because what the fuck does the Kinku Order normally look like, right? What's the normal outfit? What's the standard outfit for a Kinku initiate, or a monk, or like an assassin in the Kinku Order who does stuff kind of similar to her? Like, what does their normal assassin uniform look like? That would be an interesting point of comparison in order to tell, oh, this is the thing that makes her unique. This is the thing that makes her special. We don't really have that, because everyone looks like a main character in League of Legends, and so we don't have that context very much. We kind of have it a little bit from Legends of Runeterra, but even in Legends of Runeterra, it could be better, let me put it that way. So I'm frustrated with this character design, is what I'm getting at. It's like, because nothing here is bad, right? I don't look at this character design and go, oh, this is shit, this sucks, this is terrible, like, no one here knew what they were doing, nothing here is interesting. No. This character looks cool as shit. This character looks appealing. This character looks beautiful. This character looks hot. Like, let's not fucking kid ourselves. I love the idea of a character. Like, it's stealing a little bit from Zenyatta Overwatch, I guess, but he doesn't have a copyright on that idea. Like they... What's Zenyatta's pronouns? I can't actually remember. Like, this idea of, like, using the prayer beads as like a weapon in various ways, that's an idea that's present in many forms of media. It's a really cool kind of a weapon. I'm quite excited to see how the animators handle it and like how they make it look badass and awesome. It's very cool as a weapon for a marksman. So much of this character design looks gorgeous. So much of this character design looks cool. Like, her colors are clearly identified with Spirit Blossom, right? She has the Spirit Blossom color scheme to a certain extent, and purple is a great choice there, because purple is so often associated... Hiccups from talking too much. The yapper's disease. Purple as a color is so often associated with the supernatural. Purple as a color is so often associated with, like, magic, with dreams, with spirits, with space, with, like, whatever, because it's a color that's relatively rarely found in nature, right? Like, it's a color that's relatively rare in nature, and thus has all of these mystical associations with it. So, like, the purple and white, which is the Spirit Blossom color scheme, is not at all a bad choice for her. Like, not at all a bad choice for her. And, like, I don't, like, I wish they would have developed more on the idea that these are, like, jade armbands that are, like, tarnishing or whatever. Because that's a really cool idea of, like, playing with, like, this very specific texture that jade things can have when they tarnish, like, when they grow that patina. That's the word I was looking for. Like, if that had been more present, like, in her accessories, or in the, like, because you can see it's kind of a little bit on the medallion on her chest, but then it's not on any of these bits, and it's not really on her, well, it's maybe a little bit on her hairpiece, but it's not visible. Like, it's not being played with, it's not being played up, it doesn't call attention to itself in a way that, like, would be interesting to interact with. Like, that idea of patina, of something like very ancient, sort of getting this patina as it settles more and more into itself and becomes more and more like a legendary artifact of a past time. You could do something with that in her character design if you took that, okay, she also has a patina on her, right? She's been in the spirit realm for centuries. How has it affected her? How has it affected her body? Maybe she has, like, these patches of skin on her body where it's just like she's made of spirit realm now because she's been slowly being eaten by the spirit realm while she's in there. That's an option. She kind of has the thing with her eye, I guess, where it's like, oh, there's some spirit magic going on there, but that just doesn't affect her in any way visibly. Again, nothing that has happened to her, nothing she has ever been through, nothing that's ever happened in her life seems to have had any kind of visible, readable effect on her body, and it's frustrating. But it's not like it's a bad design. None of this is bad design. It's just design that has been through that process that I described at the start of the video. It has been sanded down. I guarantee you, there's 10,000 more interesting, more radical, more wild and out there ideas on the cutting room floor at Riot Games right now, from, like, where artists were, like, going for what if this, what if that cool thing, what if this cool thing, and then it goes through the process, it all gets sanded down, and what we end up with is a character who keeps making, in their character design, the less interesting choice. The safer choice, the choice that results in a beautiful, appealing, sexy, cool-looking, like, baseline, just, like, nice-looking character, but not an interesting one. Right? That is my criticism of Yunara. On a first reaction, again, there's more details. I will have a look at her animations in just a second. But my first reaction to Yunara is, this is not very interesting. It's not bad. It's not great. It's just, yeah, that sure looks like a video game character in 2025. Like, if a version of her with a slightly different art style had been revealed as a Genshin Impact character, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. That looks like a video game character in 2025. If that character had shown up in literally any of the video game trailers for Summer Games Fest that happened recently, I would have been like, yeah, that makes sense. That looks like a game character in 2025. That's what this looks like. A video game character in 2025. Not really distinct or interesting, not really swinging for any fences, not really doing anything interesting or off the wall or unique, just, this is a video game character in 2025. Which, I mean, okay, cool. Even in this, like, this is some of the concept art that was posted for her. Even here, I feel like the slightly different art style is doing something a bit more interesting with her. Like, here she looks a little bit more distinct. Again, that's a skinny-ass fucking body. Again, I don't mind that she's skinny if it had been something like, oh, she's been in the spirit realm for, like, 500 years, she hasn't eaten anything, her body is emaciated, and she's kind of, like, she kind of looks a little bit fucked up from being in the spirit realm. That would have been cool, but that's not why she's skinny, is it? Like, that's not why. So, yeah. Let's have a look at her animations, as ever, courtesy of Skin Spotlights. Yeah, actually, I'm gonna go back and look at that attack animation a little bit more. Because it does look like in the attack animation that we are doing a sort of... yeah, like a very hard strike kind of thing, right? Like, the way that she's animated, it's like she winds up, and then it's like, pow! It's like this pop, this, like, very hard, straight strike, and then, like, the orb flies out. Wait, she doesn't have a transition animation at all? Or is it just... Yeah. Yeah, it's like fairly unacrobatic, fairly straightforward attack animation by the look of it. Which I guess that makes sense. Right, then there's her ultimate transcend oneself. Again, this gives me that vibe of, like, this is a monk character, right? Like, this is someone who's like I have meditated for 100 years under a waterfall and I reached a higher plane of existence. That kind of vibe. And again, her posture here very much seems to indicate... Like, it's not fancy, the animation that they use to get her into this, right? Like, it's just, she kind of just takes a stance and hardens herself there. Right? She's kind of just doing a breathing exercise. And it is very sort of... Again, I'm not an expert on Chinese martial arts. I can't identify what this is inspired from. But this, to me, looks like it's going for that kind of like, hard, snappy kind of martial art, rather than the sort of flowing, swinging, dancing, circular, like, it's not Tai Chi, is like, that's not the vibe I'm getting from this. And certainly not like Irelia, who's also much more designed around the, like, these flowing animations. This is much more direct by the looks of it. Is that like an Aria orb, or no? Okay, it doesn't return to her. Let me have a look at that animation again. Her animation is a little bit odd, though. It, like I said, like, it seems like the attack animations are going for this very straightforward, direct. But there's something kind of a lot more agile and dance-like about some of the other ways that she moves. Interesting. Okay. I need to get into the model viewer to get a proper look at animation before I have any critical take on that, but interesting. Okay, so that's the transformed version of her thing. Okay, she becomes ghosted. Gain 60% movement speed, moving towards an enemy champion, blah, blah, blah. And then with the R, it becomes... So she's kind of doing the karma thing, actually. She's kind of doing the, like, empower her abilities with the R, and then it does something different, which, okay, interesting. Yeah, and then so long as the ultimate state persists, she can kind of vault over walls. Cool. But yeah, it looks to me... Yeah, I'm not 100% sure about the animation style that they've gone with for her. Because it seems to be sort of, like, all of her attack animations are very snappy, very straight, like, very sort of like... in that style, whereas her run and movement animation looks a lot more agile, and that walk cycle just looks a little weird. Like, why is she walking like that? Again, I'll need to get into the actual model viewer to really... But there's something a bit stompy and awkward about the way that she's running, I think. Interesting. Not a hard criticism. Again, maybe it's just the perspective. Okay, then. Ah, the dance. Yes, let's have a look at the dance. Oh, that's her taunt, I think? Yeah. Yeah, there's the taunt. I guess the first one was her laugh? Oh, it's the fucking mashal thing. And there's the laugh, I guess. What about the recall? Yeah, she's going through her forms here. Okay, again, I don't know enough about East Asian martial arts to identify specifically what she's pulling from there. Is it some form of kung fu, maybe? Like, it's just not, like, maybe it's just not something I recognize. Because that, like, some of the flowing motion that she's doing there... Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I want to emphasize that this is outside of my field of expertise. Oh, that's a cool home guard. I like that a lot. That's a very cool home guard. She just fucking jumps on the orbs. That kind of rules. I like that. That's very good. Like, that's great for, like, a martial arts master arriving at a fight, right? Like, that Tao Bai arriving at the fucking pole that he himself threw. That's a deep cut from Dragon Ball, I know, but still, that has kind of that vibe. I really like that. That's very cool. I want a closer look at her animations, and I want a closer look at her character model in-game, in the model viewer. Because, like, right now, my criticisms of her character design are really just based on the splash art, like, which is a very static and a very specific presentation of the character. So I'm curious what she's going to look like once we get into the actual sort of, like, the actual makeup of her model. And I want to know more about her lore. Because, like, all we really know of her is the bio that I saw on Twitter.com in this instance. And the little bits of, like, oh, like, Xin Zhao kind of made psychic contact with her when he went home to Ionia for a festival. Kind of, she sort of showed up in that cinematic for, like, a quarter of a second. Where she had kind of a much more sort of uncertain, soft personality than what's being shown off in this splash art here, which I'm curious about. Like, I'm very curious about her character, like, her personhood, like, who is this person? Because, like, I don't know, like, the voice acting strike has only just looked like, it only just now looks like SAG-AFTRA is ending their strike. So I don't know if she has voiceover at all. She might not. I also wasn't listening to the audio in the Skin Spotlights video, so I don't know if there's any of it there. So I'm curious about what her dialogue, like, what kind of personality is she? Because, again, splash arts are a very specific presentation of the character that doesn't really show the whole of them. And maybe once the actual personality of the character, once the actual, like, who she is, maybe some parts of the character design will work better. Like, maybe they will actually have some storytelling power relative to some of the other parts of her presentation that they lack right now, because all I really have to go off is a splash art and, like, an ability presentation video. But yeah, it's just... it's not bad. That's what's frustrating about it. If it was bad, if it was terrible, it would at least be interesting. It's just... it's sanded down. It is character design that has been progressively sanded down towards the lowest common denominator, so that it can make it through the corporate approvals process and become a character design that has very little to say and very little to show off beyond, look how cool I look, look how beautiful I am, look how hot I look how appealing I am at a baseline. That's sort of all that's really going on here that's readable to the naked eye. Like, compare and contrast the way that her character design presents her here relative to... actually, let me fucking find that splash art. Oh, okay. You want me to download it? Fair enough. Relative to Urgot, right? Relative to how Urgot is presented to us. Like... oh, that's not the... here's something that says a lot more about who the character is, right? And that's in part, not entirely, but in part because Urgot has more options available to him as a character design. Because it's not just about beauty, he can do things with grotesquerie, with weirdness, with ugliness, with like raw fucking wounds on his skin that show the way that he damages himself, like, and poisons himself in order, like, and it's not just Urgot, like, it's other characters as well. More options become available when beauty isn't the only thing that that can survive the feedback process. When beauty and appeal isn't the only thing that can survive the design process that's present at the company, more design options become available, more interesting choices become available, more creative choices become available. And it's not just Yunara. It's male characters as well. Like, let there not be any fucking doubt that the male characters kind of suffer from this as well. The update of Lee Sin, like, there are more interesting choices that could have been done about the way that that character's body is presented. A lot of the same choices, then kind of the same problems that Yunara has, is like Lee Sin, there's a lot more that could be done to present the weirdness of the way that that man treats his body. There are things that could be done with his backstory and the storytelling for that could have been much more effective if it wasn't tied down so much to wanting to appeal. Because that's a big part of why Lee Sin looks the way he does as well, is that when they did the update for him, it was like, oh, well, we can't upset any of the old Lee Sin mains. We need to make the character that makes their main look as cool as possible, so we can't make him look weird or off-putting or, like, fucked up in any kind of meaningful, interesting way. Even though Lee Sin's story, like, the story of the character, is one of him being kind of fucked up, like, of suffering and pain and like failure. Like, he has a deep failure in his past. That's a big part of who he is as a character, but none of that is really allowed to be expressed in his design because, well, he has to look cool, and he has to look badass, and he has to look appealing. And those choices override other more interesting options for character design. Because, you know, commercial, objective, line must go up, all of that nonsense. Anyway, for now, I think that's more or less what I have to say about Yunara. I don't know that I have had anything surprising to say about her, if you're familiar with my content, but I did want to talk about it, because, like, I opened with that long monologue about, oh, this is what the design process is like, this is why the character ended up the way that she did, because it's not about, is the artist who made the splash art good at their job. It's not about whether the character designers who were responsible for her principal design are good at their job, or if they're stupid or uncreative. It's not about that. It's a structural thing. It's a much bigger, much more systematic, difficult thing. That's why it is the way that it is. And I just kind of wanted to get that across. Anyway, video, subscribe, membership, things. Bye.